Hello and welcome to the SPH Teaching Kitchen's online cooking series. My name is Emily, and in today's lesson I'm going to show you how to make our Besitos De Coco, which translates to coconut kisses, and they're going to be very similar to a coconut macaroon. So whatever you like to call them, they're a really delicious coconutty cookie. Now, whether you're used to making Besitos De Coco or coconut macaroons, our ingredients are generally the same. We're going to have shredded coconut, some egg whites, a little bit of sugar, and then traditionally we will have some sweetened condensed milk. So these cookies are very delicious, but they can be very sweet as well. There's usually a lot of sugar in there. So in our version, we're going to lighten them up a little bit and reduce how much added sugar we're using. Now we're going to start with 2 cups of sweetened shredded coconut. Sometimes that unsweetened coconut can be really hard to find at the grocery store, so we're going to stick with the sweetened coconut. Now, because this is already very sweet, that means we don't need to add a lot of extra sugar to our recipe. So we're only going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar for the whole recipe. These cookies are still going to be delicious and plenty sweet, even though we're not adding a ton of sugar here. Now, one thing I do with my coconut, this is totally optional. The coconut that I find at my store is pretty coarse. They're pretty big pieces of coconut, and I find that makes it hard to form the cookies. So what I like to do is actually chop up some of that coconut and make finer pieces of it or smaller pieces of it, and I find that gives me a better texture for my cookie. I do this by hand with a knife. You could do a blender or a food processor to chop up some of that coconut, or you could just skip that step entirely. This is just something that I like to do. In addition to our coconut, we are going to use about a teaspoon of vanilla extract and then a 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. The almond extract is optional, so you don't have to use it if you don't like it. And then the base of our cookies is actually going to be whipped egg whites. So I'm going to show you how to whip those egg whites. The first thing we need to do is separate the yolk from the white. So we can do that by cracking our egg, and then in one bowl, that's where my white is going to go. And you can see most of that white just comes out of the egg naturally. I'm holding the yolk in the shell, and my preferred way to make sure that I get all of the white off of the yolk is I actually just hold that yolk in my fingers and I let the white fall in between my fingers, and then that yolk can just go into a container on the side. We want to make sure we keep these separate. When we're whipping our egg whites, we don't want any yolk in there because it prevents it from whipping as much as we would like it to. Now, because I have my one good white, I'm going to pour that into my bowl before cracking my other egg. In case I break the yolk on my egg, I don't want to ruin the egg white that's already good. Now, with your extra egg yolks, you can use them in some other baked goods. I like to mix them into scrambled eggs, so don't throw those away. There's definitely other uses for them. Alright, I have my 2 egg whites in my bowl, and we're going to whisk this to a firm peak. So I will show you what that looks like as we're going, but first we just want to start whisking our egg whites until they start to look a little bit frothy. You can do this with a hand mixer or a stand mixer. It's much faster that way, but I want to show you that this can be done by hand in case you don't have that equipment. Alright, now we can see our egg whites are turning frothy, so that is a good time to add our sugar. And then we're going to keep whisking until we get to a firm peak. So at this stage you can see our egg whites are looking really white. They're frothy, but they're not really holding their shape at all, so we want to keep whisking. So I've been whisking my egg whites for about 2 minutes now. We can see they're holding their shape pretty well. They're not falling out of my bowl. They're going to be a bright white. They're going to be glossy, and that's from the sugar that we added. And we want to test to see if it has firm peaks. So when we're talking about egg whites, what that means is I'm going to take my whisk, I'm going to stick it straight into the whites, pull up, and flip over. Our egg whites are going to form a peak, kind of like a mountaintop, at the top of our whisk. For a firm peak, that tip is going to fold over onto itself. Now I may have whisked my egg whites a little bit more than that to the next stage, which is a stiff peak, meaning that the tip of my egg whites is not folding over onto itself, it's standing straight up. That's okay if you get to that point, but you don't want to whisk anymore because you can over whisk your egg whites, and then it's really hard to recover from that. So from here, I'm just going to add my vanilla extract and my almond extract. I'm going to add about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And again, the almond extract is optional, but you just want a little bit, maybe like a quarter of a teaspoon. Stir that in. And then we can go ahead and add our coconut. For our coconut, we are going to switch to a spatula to gently fold that coconut into our egg whites. We just spent a lot of time and effort getting a lot of air into these egg whites, so we don't want to deflate them. And again, I'm using 2 cups of sweetened coconut here, and I'm just going to gently fold that all together. And now our mixture should hold its shape pretty well. It shouldn't be very loose or liquidy. If it seems like your mixture is really thin and runny, you could always just add some more coconut to it, or even a tablespoon or 2 of flour, just to help it hold together a little bit better. Now to form and bake these, we're going to use 1 baking sheet, and I've lined this with parchment paper, but I'm also going to spray this with a little bit of oil, just because this does tend to stick a lot on our baking sheets. To form my cookies, I like to use a small cookie scoop. It kind of looks like an ice cream scoop, just smaller. If you don't have one of these, you can use a regular spoon and just use your fingers to try to form it into a nice ball. Alright, so I've made 14 cookies here. Depending on the size of your scoop, you might make anywhere between 12 and 16 cookies. And you'll see that these aren't perfectly round. What can happen is any of these bits that are sticking out could burn as we're baking them, so I just like to use my fingers to tuck in the edges and make sure that these are as round as possible. Once your cookies are nicely shaped, they kind of look like little snowballs, we can bake these at 350 degrees for 18 to 22 minutes. We want them to be a nice light golden brown color on the outside. Alright, so our cookies just came out of the oven. They ended up baking for 20 minutes at 350 degrees. And you can see they're starting to turn a nice golden brown color on top. They're brown on the bottom as well, but not burnt. Now there is a lot of debate over what color macaroons should be when they come out of the oven. Some people prefer them to be very white, other people prefer them to be a little more toasted, so that's really up to you. But the most important thing is this cookie is holding its shape really well. It's not too soft, it's nice and firm in the center, and we're not burnt on the bottom. And you can see they're not sticking very much either because we sprayed our pan with that cooking oil. If you find that your cookies are sticking, maybe you forgot to grease your pan, don't worry too much, just let them cool completely before removing them from the pan and you should be all set. Thank you for joining us with the SPH Teaching Kitchen's online cooking series. This has been our recipe for Besitos De Coco, and we will see you again for the next one.